Hello, curious minds. Welcome to this intellectual journey. Today, we're diving into an idea so powerful that without you even realizing it, it has shaped how you love, how you feel, and most importantly, how you see yourself. An idea that spread like wildfire across the globe. What if I told you that your sense of identity, that inner voice you call me or the self, isn't entirely yours? What if it was an invention, an emotional rebellion that happened over 200 years ago, and one we still haven't quite recovered from? Think about that for a second, an idea that defines you. This is the story of the self-fever, the very heart of romanticism. Not the stuffy, boring poems you might remember from school, but a chaotic, global force that taught humanity to feel with an intensity never before seen, from Germany all the way to Persia, a true revolution of consciousness. Before we dive in, I wanted to quickly mention something about the visuals you're seeing. To bring this narrative to life, I've used AI tools to generate the images. So think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and the atmosphere of what I'm telling you. They won't always be an exact or literal representation, but rather a visual companion to help your imagination soar with me. I truly hope you enjoy it. To truly grasp the magnitude of this explosion, we first need to travel back to a world without a self. Before the 18th century, your worth wasn't found within. Your identity was defined by your family, your God, your king, or your community. You were a cog in a grand social machine, and your personal emotions were, by and large, irrelevant. The universe was a perfect clock, crafted by a divine watchmaker, and reason was the tool to understand its workings. The Enlightenment gave us science, order, and progress, but it came at a cost. It silenced the heart. Passion, chaos, and individual emotion were seen as glitches in the system, a madness that needed to be contained. But then in Germany, something snapped. A group of young writers and poets grew fed up with that suffocating order. They named their movement Sturm und Drang, which translates to storm and stress, or storm and drive. And that's exactly what it was, a storm of emotions raging against the cold, sterile castle of reason. They declared a new truth: the most authentic and human experience wasn't found in logic, but in pure, raw, and often contradictory feeling. Ecstatic joy, profound melancholy, all-consuming love, that was true life. The individual and their inner universe became the center of everything. The great catalyst for this rebellion was Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. His novel, The Sorrows of Young Werther, wasn't just a book, it was a viral sensation. It told the story of a young artist consumed by unrequited love to the point of suicide, a narrative that explored the self in a radically new way. The novel unleashed a collective hysteria. Historians document that young people across Europe started dressing like Werther, with blue jackets and yellow vests. And more tragically, it sparked a wave of copycat suicides, a phenomenon modern sociologists still study. The power of an idea was real, and it was dangerous. What Goethe did was validate personal suffering. He told the world that your feelings, no matter how dark, were important. In fact, they were proof you were alive. The melancholic, tormented self wasn't a flaw, but a mark of depth and sensitivity. The romantic hero was born. Meanwhile, across the Channel in England, the fever took a different form. Here, the self wasn't found in social torment, but in a far older, more sacred place, nature. Poets like William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge began a pilgrimage into the wild. For them, nature wasn't just a collection of trees and mountains. It was a mirror to the human soul. A walk through the woods or the contemplation of a lake wasn't merely a pastime, it was a spiritual act. It was a way to connect with a deeper truth within oneself, far from the corrupting noise of industrial society. Wordsworth wrote about how the sight of daffodils could fill his heart with pleasure, even in moments of solitude. Emotion recollected in tranquility became poetry. The self was nourished by memory and natural beauty. Nature was the cathedral where the individual could worship themselves. This idea is so potent that it survives to this day. When we say we need to escape to nature, to find ourselves, we are, in essence, repeating a romantic creed. We are seeking that mirror of the soul they discovered 2 centuries ago. It's a direct legacy of their thought. But the fever didn't stop in tranquil landscapes. In France, the self loaded up with gunpowder and stormed the barricades. The French Revolution, with its motto of liberty, equality, fraternity, was in many ways a romantic revolution. The idea that an individual could and should overthrow an unjust system was pure political romanticism. Writers like Victor Hugo took this energy and immortalized it. In Les Miserables, the heroes aren't kings or nobles, they are the outcasts, the rebels, the passionate lovers. Characters like Jean Valjean or Fantine are pure romantic selves, guided by their conscience and their heart against the cruelty of society. French Romanticism taught us that the self doesn't just feel, but acts. It has a moral responsibility to fight for justice, to defend the oppressed. Individual passion became a driving force for social change. Your personal conscience, I could and should change the world. A truly revolutionary idea. Now, here's where the story gets even more interesting, because this self-fever wasn't an exclusively European phenomenon. While in the West, the self was sought in rebellion and nature, in the Persian world, a millennia-old tradition explored the soul in a completely different, yet parallel way. I'm talking about Sufism, the mystical branch of Islam, and its most celebrated poet, Rumi. Centuries before the European Romantics, Sufi poets were already obsessed with the inner journey, with the personal and intimate relationship between the individual and the divine. It was a different way of searching for the self. For Rumi, love wasn't just a human feeling, it was the force that moved the universe. The self wasn't something to be glorified, but to be annihilated, dissolved into a love so vast that it erased the separation between the lover and the beloved, between human and God, a concept of total union. His poetry uses the language of romantic love, speaking of longing, the pain of separation, and the ecstasy of union. But the beloved is ultimately the divine. The wound is the place where the light enters you, Rumi wrote. Just as in Werther's Romanticism, pain is a portal to a deeper truth. So we have two paths that seem opposite, yet stem from the same fundamental need. The Western romantic self seeks to assert itself, to shout its existence to the world. In contrast, the self of Sufi mysticism seeks to transcend, to lose itself in something greater. Yet both place emotional and individual experience at the absolute center of the universe. This demonstrates that Romanticism wasn't just a literary movement. It was a global human response to a fundamental question. What does it mean to be an individual? How do we navigate our inner universe? A young German reading Goethe and a Persian mystic reading Rumi were both on the same quest. The fever spread everywhere. In Russia, poets like Pushkin and Lermontov created the figure of the superfluous man, an alienated romantic hero, too intelligent and sensitive for a society that couldn't understand him. A direct echo of Goethe's Werther, but with a distinctly Russian flavor. In the United States, Emerson and Thoreau's Transcendentalism was an American take on European Romanticism. Self-reliance, individual intuition, and a connection to the wild nature of the New World were its pillars. Trust thyself, every heart vibrates to that iron string, Emerson wrote. Even in Latin America, Romanticism took root, blending with the struggles for independence. National heroes were often romantic figures, and literature used the exaltation of local landscapes as a way to forge a new national identity, a collective yet individual self. The idea was simply too contagious. The primacy of emotion, the sanctity of the individual, and nature as a spiritual refuge. These concepts became the operating system of the modern mind. We take it for granted that we should follow our heart or be true to ourselves. These are purely romantic ideas. Now we come to the twist. The moment this 200-year-old story crashes head-on into your 21st century reality, because this fever, the fever of the self, hasn't disappeared. In fact, it's never been stronger. It has simply mutated, adapting to our new digital world. Think about it. What is a social media platform but a global stage for the performance of the self? Every profile, every photo, every status update is a curated declaration of our identity. Here I am, this is me, these are my feelings, my experiences, my tastes. It's the apotheosis of romantic individualism. The tormented romantic hero now posts melancholic selfies with artistic filters. Wordsworth's quest for wild nature has become travel photos of exotic places with hashtags like wanderlust, which fittingly is a German word meaning desire to travel. The connection is direct. The multi-billion-dollar wellness and self-help industry thrives on the romantic promise of finding your true self. Meditation, yoga, self-help books, they all sell us the idea that there's an authentic, pure being inside us, just waiting to be discovered if only we buy the right method. We are obsessed with authenticity, a supreme value in the romantic era. We want jobs that we're passionate about, relationships that complete us, and experiences that feel genuine. We reject the artificial, the corporate, the imposed, in a rebellion that's a direct echo of the German Sturm und Drang. But this legacy has a dark side. The glorification of the self can also lead to profound narcissism and crippling loneliness. If the individual is the center of the universe, community weakens. The pressure to be unique, special, and constantly happy is exhausting. It's Werther's melancholy, but on a global scale. Cancel culture, for example, can be seen as a modern version of romantic moral judgment. We judge public figures not by their works, but by the authenticity and purity of their self. We search for the blemish in their character, and the passion of the crowd is unleashed, much like in Victor Hugo's novels. So the next time you feel a deep need to express yourself, to connect with nature, or you feel misunderstood by society, remember this: you're not alone in that feeling. you're part of a centuries-old conversation. You're feeling the echo of the fever that defined the modern era. Romanticism isn't a dead chapter in history books. It's the air we breathe. It's the language we use to talk about our deepest emotions. It gave us permission to feel, to be complex, to believe that our inner life matters more than anything else. It bequeathed us an incredible gift, the idea that each self is a unique universe worthy of exploration. But it also left us with a burden to make sense of that universe, often in solitude. It's a beautiful yet terribly heavy legacy. From the youthful rebellion of Sturm und Drang to Rumi's mystical quest, through English nature and French barricades, the search for the self was, and continues to be, humanity's great adventure. A fever that infected us all and made us who we are. The invention of the romantic self was a point of no return. Before, people suffered, loved, and died, but the idea that these personal experiences were the center of human existence was radical. It changed art, politics, and psychology forever. It taught us a new language for the soul. Think about music. Compare the ordered mathematical structure of Bach from the Baroque period with the emotional, personal explosion of Beethoven's symphonies. That transition is the sound of Romanticism being born. It's the self taking control of the orchestra with all its passions and torments. Or in art, prior neoclassicism sought perfection, balance, and mythological themes. Romantic painters like Caspar David Friedrich painted landscapes that were, in reality, landscapes of the soul. His solitary figures facing the immensity of nature are portraits of the self confronting the infinite. What's fascinating is how each culture adapted this fever to its own idiosyncrasies. German melancholy isn't the same as French revolutionary passion, nor Persian mysticism. The self donned the attire of each nation, demonstrating its incredible flexibility as an idea. Even the concept of romantic love, as we know it, is largely a construct of this era. The idea that there must be a unique soul connection, a soulmate, and that this love justifies breaking social conventions is the driving force behind countless romantic novels and poems. Before this, marriage was often an economic or social transaction. Romanticism reinvented it as the ultimate expression of the self. Loving someone became a way of knowing oneself, an idea that today completely dominates our culture, from Hollywood movies to dating apps. Let's return to that global connection. The Sufi poetry of Hafez and Rumi became extremely popular in Europe during the 19th century. Goethe himself was fascinated and wrote his West Eastern Divan as a tribute. The greatest thinkers recognized they were part of the same conversation across centuries and cultures. In the heart of Persia, modern-day Iran, the search for the self took an introspective and mystical path. Here, poetry wasn't a cry of rebellion against society, but a whisper of the soul yearning for union with the divine. Emotion was the vehicle for spiritual transcendence. The figure of the poet as an almost prophetic being, someone who can see the hidden truths of the universe through the intensity of their feeling, is an idea that unites the European romantic with the Eastern mystic. Both are explorers of the invisible worlds hidden within us, and we can't forget the dark Gothic side of Romanticism. Authors like Mary Shelley with Frankenstein or Edgar Allan Poe explored the nightmares of the self. What happens when individual ambition runs wild, or when the mind plunges into madness and horror? These are the inevitable shadows of the light of individualism. Frankenstein is the definitive romantic parable. A scientist, Victor Frankenstein, in his arrogant pursuit of individual knowledge, creates an other, a monster that is the manifestation of his own repressed and solitary self. It's a warning about the dangers of playing God, a central theme for the Romantics. Thus, Romanticism gave us the tools to understand both our highest dreams and our deepest nightmares. It taught us to see beauty in the imperfect, the sublime in the terrifying, and the heroic in the melancholic. It radically expanded the vocabulary of human experience. Consider how this idea impacts your daily life. When you choose a career based on your passion rather than security, that's Romanticism. When you end a relationship because you don't feel like yourself, that's Romanticism. When you seek an authentic travel experience, that's Romanticism. We are, for better or worse, the children of this revolution. We inherited its individualism, its yearning for transcendence, and its belief in the redemptive power of emotion. But we also inherited its potential for loneliness and narcissism. The self-fever still runs through our veins. So how do we navigate this legacy? The first step is to be aware of it, to understand that many of our deepest beliefs about ourselves aren't universal truths, but ideas with a history, ideas that were forged at a specific time for specific reasons. This doesn't diminish their value. On the contrary, it allows us to appreciate the incredible intellectual and emotional odyssey that brought us here. It gives us a map to navigate our own inner landscape, recognizing the mountains of passion, the valleys of melancholy, and the rivers of creativity that the Romantics first charted. The next time you hear a song that moves you to tears, or see a sunset that takes your breath away, or feel a love so strong it seems like it will burst your chest, pause for a moment. Recognize that feeling. It's the romantic fever. It's the legacy of poets, rebels, and mystics who taught you to feel this way. In the end, the search for the self has no final destination. It's a continuous journey. The Romantics didn't give us an answer, they gave us something far more valuable, the question and permission to embark on the quest. A quest that today each of us continues in our own way. The exaltation of individual genius, of the artist as a tortured and exceptional being, is another of Romanticism's great exports. Before, an artist was a craftsman serving a patron or the church. Afterward, they became a hero, a seer whose only loyalty was to their own inner vision. This idea has created immense pressure on today's creatives. The expectation to be completely original, to suffer for your art, and to channel a profound truth. It's a romantic ideal that can be both a source of inspiration and crushing anxiety. An almost impossible standard to meet. Even the way we conceive of childhood changed. Before, children were seen as miniature adults. The Romantics, like the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, idealized them as pure and innocent beings, uncorrupted by society. Childhood became a lost paradise that the adult self longed to recover. This romantic vision of childhood is still with us. It shapes our education, our child protection laws, and our cultural nostalgia for a supposed lost innocence. It's another of the invisible threads connecting our present with that explosion of ideas 200 years ago. The irony is that in searching for authenticity, we often fall into imitation. The young people who dressed like Werther in the 18th century are the ancestors of today's influencers who adopt a particular aesthetic to project a specific self. The performance of authenticity is a romantic paradox. Romanticism, at its core, was a profoundly youthful movement. It was the first time in history that youth culture, with its rebellion, idealism, and emotional intensity, took center stage. Every countercultural movement since then owes something to Sturm und Drang, and nature their great sanctuary. The idea of protecting the environment has roots in the romantic veneration for the wild. Early environmentalists often used language that Wordsworth or Thoreau would have recognized, speaking of nature not in terms of resources, but of spiritual and aesthetic value. So the next time you recycle a bottle or worry about climate change, remember that part of that ethical impulse was fueled by poets who saw in a landscape not just earth and water, but the face of the divine and a mirror to their own soul. The connection runs deep. The journey of the self is therefore a labyrinth. It has paths that lead to liberation, creativity, and deep connection. But it also has dead ends that lead to narcissism, loneliness, and despair. It's the map of modern consciousness, with all its light and all its darkness. From passionate love that defies death to quiet communion with a solitary tree. From the fight for social justice to mystical dissolution into the all these are expressions of the same fever, the same attempt to answer the most human question of all, who am I? And that question, once formulated with the force that the Romantics did, could no longer be ignored. It's settled in the heart of our civilization and continues to beat strongly, driving our greatest works of art and our deepest existential crises. Global Romanticism taught us that our internal geographies are as vast and worthy of exploration as any continent on Earth. It gave us the courage to be the heroes of our own stories. It gave us the language to narrate our inner journey. In the end, perhaps the self isn't something to be found, like lost treasure. Perhaps it's something to be created. It's created with every choice, with every poem that moves us, with every landscape that astounds us, with every love that transforms us. Romanticism didn't give us a destination, it gave us a compass and a blank canvas. It's the idea that your life can be your greatest work of art, a liberating yet terrifying idea, but it is perhaps the most enduring and powerful legacy of this global fever we've discussed today, the one that convinced us that the experience of being alive was in itself sacred. The next time you look at the stars, don't just think about astronomy. Think about the romantic poets who saw in them a reflection of their infinite longings. About the Sufi mystics who saw them as the veil of the divine. You are participating in a tradition of wonder that connects us all. The influence is so subtle that sometimes it's invisible. When a politician appeals to hearts and minds or to the spirit of the nation, they're using romantic rhetoric. The idea of the nation as an entity with a soul and a collective destiny is an extrapolation of the individual romantic self. This incessant quest also fuels our consumer culture. We buy products not for their utility, but for what they say about our self. A craft coffee, a specific car brand, designer clothes. They are symbols we use to construct and communicate our unique identity. Even in science, a field seemingly opposite to emotion, the romantic spirit persists. The solitary scientist, driven by insatiable passion and curiosity, working day and night to unveil a secret of the universe, is a deeply romantic figure. They are the explorer of the unknown. We've seen how an idea, born of rebellion and poetry, crossed borders, transformed cultures, and redefined what it means to be human. From Werther's torment to Rumi's ecstasy, humanity embarked on its most intimate journey, the discovery of the self. The story of global romanticism is ultimately our own story. It's the autobiography of our modern mind. Understanding it is understanding ourselves better, with our contradictions, our passions, and our eternal search for meaning in a complex world. I hope this journey has given you a new perspective on why you feel what you feel, that you see the imprints of these poets and thinkers in your own life, and that you appreciate the complexity of the legacy we've all inherited. In conclusion, the self-fever taught us that every individual life is an epic, that in the smallest of emotions can reside the greatest of truths, and that the search for oneself, though sometimes painful, is the most valuable adventure we can undertake. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Your curiosity and your time are the greatest gift. I hope you've enjoyed this analysis as much as I've enjoyed preparing it for you. If you've enjoyed this journey into the depths of literature and psychology, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next intellectual adventures. And tell me in the comments, how does this self-fever manifest in your own life? I'd love to read your thoughts.